picture. You can't really see it in this light. It's a beautiful plant. That's Graptopetalum. Yeah, it looks like a little chiseled. A good picture of it in the book. This one's pretty common. Some of you have this one? This one it's almost like a jade. It's a really bulletproof plant. Its name is Graptopetalum paraguayensis. It's actually from Mexico. Apparently 100 years ago there was a box mislabeled for Paraguay and it had that in it, so they thought it was from Paraguay, but it's a Mexican plant. And you can just break a piece off and roll it. Wherever it stops rolling, it's going to root. You can do jade too. They're really easy. A nice old garden hybrid. I guess it was actually done in England. It's called Graptopetalum Fred Ives. Apparently he was a legendary English plant guy back in the 40s and 50s. You kind of see how it has, the bottom one has that color. Old leaves sometimes when leaves start to get old, they get kind of a nice color, so temporarily have a nice two-tone look to it. The one at the bottom right is Cedaveria, so it's a cross of a sedum and an echeveria. It's called Cedaveria letitia, and in the winter cold it gets a beautiful red color, and then other times of the year it's just green, so it goes through cycles, but it really gets a deep red color. That's Graptopetalum Debbie on the top right. It makes a nice little carpet. And well, actually not related to the echeverias. They look like they should be, but they're not. Are our native soft succulents, which are Dudleyias. Do any of you grow any Dudleyias? Good, you should, because they're our native plant. They're our only native soft succulent, almost our only native ornamental succulent from California. All the way from Oregon down through Baja, mostly along the coast, but there's a few desert forms. The Dudleyias are these big white, there's green too ones, but the ones we like in cultivation are the big white, chalky, beautiful ones. I sold one earlier today.
Right here?
Yeah. That's Dudleya Brittani. That's the same as the one you see on the screen. This one's in habitat right by in Baja in Rosarito, where that's native to. This little finger root Dudleya here I have also. Because they're natives, they grow great in the winter time, and like Ionians, they kind of want to shrink up a little bit in the summer. That's part of their growing style. I'm working on a book on Dudleyas now with some guys that are more expert than I am on them. That's me down in Cedros Island, which is a little island about halfway off of Baja. There's a very rare type of Dudleya called Dudleya pachyphytum. Remember earlier I mentioned pachyphytums? They call it that because, I don't know if you can tell, but look how fat those leaves are on that plant. It's a very unique Dudleya, and it only grows in the very northern tip of Cedros Island off of Baja. It's the only place they're from, so we took a special trip to get there. It was a plane drive, and a plane and boat, and a 4-mile hike up the top of the top ridge of the island to get there. It was quite a trek. And we got there, and they recently have been poached. They've been stealing these things. And also in Northern California, they've been stealing them too, mostly going back to the Asian markets. And but there was apparently this was like 3 years ago, and I was there was a shootout between the drug cartels found out about the value of these things. So they've been up there stealing, and 2 guys died up there, just where I was, so I'm not going back there. But we have them, luckily we are starting those in cultivation.
Can you spell that last one, then, whatever?
Dudleya pachyphytum. Pachy as in P-A-C-H-Y, fat, and phytum, P-H-Y-T-U-M is leaf, fat leaf. That's a Dudleya pachyphytum hybrid on the bottom right there. So that we do have seed of them, and we're starting to grow them in cultivation now. They're slowly getting out there. They're not hard to grow, they're hard to make more of. You got to grow them with seed because they don't multiply a lot. So we will get those plants out there. And that's the one on the top left, that's the same as this little finger one I got here. They do flower nice, you don't get them for the flower, but the flowers are a nice bonus. There's just a lot of nice forms, but the really bright white ones are the most stunning ones in a garden situation. That's a gentleman down in San Diego. That's a neat way to display Dudleyas. They grow flat, but a lot of Dudleyas do grow on cliff sides too. That's sort of how they grow naturally. So this is a sort of a sloping wall, and I just love this wall he built. I took a picture of that. I was thinking I was going to come home and make one of those, and I got home and I'm not going to make one of those. Me 20 years ago would have tackled it. Me now is not going to tackle it. But I love how he put that together. It's a really cool way to display Dudleyas. Crassulas. There's a lot of varieties of crassulas. The jade is the most famous crassula. There's a bunch of these ones that look like stacked on top of each other. On the left, that's a crassula. That's a sort of a tease. That's the one they call red pagoda. It's got a couple names. Most of the year, it does not look that good. It starts to stretch out. It turns green. After it blooms, it's kind of a mess. So I don't even really carry that one anymore because it rarely looks that good. The one on the right is a little bit better, easier to grow. That's called Crassula Campfire. Gets a nice orange color. It's a real pretty plant. It can be green. How many of you have a jade in your house? Was that jade there when you moved into it 40 years ago? Jades are like that. They just live. They're from Africa, but they might as well be a native plant here in California. They've been around forever. You cannot kill them. They'll survive most frost. They're just tough plants. The regular round green leaf jade is so common, it's like a giveaway plant. But there's some other really cool forms. There's variegated ones, pink flowered ones, hybrids of them. The one on the top right is a different species. The silver dollar jade, one of my favorites. It's got nice round silver dollar leaves to it. Yeah, that's a silver dollar on the right. On the left is one I really like a lot. It's called Crassula undulata. It's actually undulata folia. It's this big undulating leaf thing that makes a nice big mound. They've got that again water-wise. I try to carry it when I can too. It's super easy to grow. If you trim it up underneath, you can make it look like a little jade tree. It's got that same jade trunk underneath it. Some of them make really good bonsais. These are good in the ground as big bushes, but there's two forms called hobbit or golem. And those, I get several people who think I have those names backwards, so it's one of those little debates we have in the plant community. But they're slightly different forms of basically the same plant, and they just make a nice. Also, I bet some of you have bonsai pots at home with dead trees or nothing in them, right? Yeah. Jades. There's a lot of succulents you can make nice bonsais, low maintenance bonsais with, and jades are a great candidate for those empty bonsai pots. And just an assortment of some of those stacked crassulas they just have a wonderful geometry to them. In the book, I do outline what the names of all these various ones are. Perforata on the top right is a really nice one. That's a nice hanging one. I normally, us in the plant community, we like to go by the Latin name so we know we're talking about the correct plant. This one has a terrible name, I can never remember it, but the common name they gave this one is Calico Kitten, and that one sticks pretty good. So this is Calico Kitten. Well, you know what that one looks like? It does kind of look like a snake. I got this picture from a guy, John Traeger, who's one of the curators up at the Huntington. It's his photo. And he sent it to me without a name. And I looked at that thing, and you know what it looks like to me? Do you guys know what a pangolin is? A pangolin, it's like an armadillo type thing that has this, it's mammal, but it has like armored plates to it. I thought it looked a lot like a pangolin shell, a pangolin skin. And I sent that picture to John to ask him what the name was, and he says, yeah, that's Crassula pangolin. I got it right. It's a hybrid. It doesn't exist quite like that in nature. Oh, there's a pangolin. That's right. So you see the similarity there? Supposedly, the coronavirus is transmitted by these guys. Or that's how it crossed over, somehow handling the pangolins. I heard they were in the news recently. Yeah, they are endangered. It's like one of the millions of things that well, I think there's an African, I think there's a South American, I can't remember. Whether I just wish people would leave them alone, but some of the Chinese markets, they think it gives you sexual potency or something if you eat it. I don't know what the deal is. How many of you have this thing here, the propeller plant, Crassula fulcata? It's an easy grower. It's got nice parallel kind of leaves the way it grows. And when they flower, it looks like these big orange-red broccoli flowers when they bloom. Really impressive. It's a midsummer bloomer. Almost everything blooms, typically in the spring. These bloom after everything's done. By August is when they usually flower for us. July or August. That is called, the propeller plant is a common name, Crassula fulcata. That's the silver dollar jade behind it. The propeller plant's the one in the front.
Do they have yellow flowers too?
I've never seen yellow on this one, no. I've seen grades of orange to red. It's usually a bright orange color. And Portulacaria afra looks a lot like a jade, but with much smaller leaves. I always thought it must be related to the jades, and I found out it's not even close at all. I don't know if you know what alawadias are, the African nakatillos, they're spiny things. It's related to those, but it's a completely spineless relative of that. But they grow like jades. That one on the right's about an 8-foot tall, large, trimmed to look like a bonsai. There's a procumbent form top left that is a ground cover, or it's a good cascading form. The regular form goes upright. They do bloom with a little purple flower that not very often, but it is a summer bloomer when it finally blooms. There's variegated forms. They will grow in vacant lots. And on the top right, just growing in Fallbrook on the side of the road. It never gets watered. Look how good that one's doing. The bottom right's the variegated one, trimmed as a bonsai, so you can see the bonsai potential with a lot of these. Senecio, I bet some of you have the blue Senecio, blue chalk sticks. There's a big form and a small form, and the small form's a little better, but it's a slower grower. The green one's called Senecio vitalis. It's a much bigger, more robust grower. There's nice hanging Senecios. The string of pearls, string of peas on the right is a good one. The flowers smell like clove. They have really nice smelling flowers. Jacobsoni in the middle is one of my favorites. It gets really purple, and it will hang down 5 or 6 feet. It's a good cascading plant. Who wants to pronounce the one on the left? I'm going with Arianus. It's a funny name. It's related to the string of pearls. Senecio Haworthioides on the right is just powder white. It's a really, really white plant. That's the small form blue one, chalk sticks on the bottom left, called Senecio Succulents. The one on the top left, Barbertonicus, makes a great big tumbleweed-sized bush with yellow flowers. Sedums. There's a lot of sedums that are like cold weather garden sedums that we don't even grow here in California. So I'm just showing you the ones that are like succulent sedums that will handle our Mediterranean climate. And a lot of the sedums that we do grow are like these. They're little small, ground covering kind of plants that they're not really great long term in the ground, but they're great in like dish gardens or small gardens as little complementary plants in between other plants. The one in the bottom middle is a really bright chartreuse color. It's barely a succulent, though. I do get that plant, and it's the first thing, if I lay it on the water, that's the first thing that tells me I need to water it. So it's on the edge of being a succulent, I think. That I got a chance to go take a fishing trip a couple summers ago up to Vancouver Island. That was growing in the rocks up in Vancouver, so there are some native ones up in the cold weather that can handle that. The one at the bottom right I like a lot. That's Sedum Bomberianum. It forms this nice big gold, it's called a golden sedum. It forms this big rusty golden yellow mound after a while. And it's a good landscape plant. And those are how many of you have donkey tails, some form of donkey tails? They're great. They're a little bit brittle. I mean, it's hard to get them looking this perfect. And at some point, the birds, kids are going to knock it in, they're going to beat them up. They get beat up really easy. I mean, they're easy growers, but they're brittle. So if you have the right location and to protect it from birds and small children, you have to have 10 or 15 years to wait. You can get them looking like that.
Or you have money to buy it looking like that.
You don't have money to buy a big one, and somebody might sell it. You can't find one like that in a nursery that you can't even move them. I mean, I can't, beyond a certain size, I can't even bring them in without beating them up. So you have to kind of grow in place, unfortunately. Rubrotitum, the jelly beans on the top, those are actually the same plant left and right, just the color can vary time of year. Multiceps on the bottom left is a really rare one. They call it the pygmy Joshua tree. It's not a Joshua tree at all, but it kind of has a profile of a Joshua tree. Now, the pronunciation here is Kalanchoe or Kalanchoa. It does look like Kalancho, but that's the proper pronunciation is Kalanchoe or Kalanchoa. That one's called, it's got a Russian kind of name, Fedchenkoe right there. That's the fuzzy Napoleon's hat on the left, Kalanchoe beharensis. There's different forms of them. The one on the bottom right is the same one with zero fuzz on the leaf. It's called nudum. It's the fuzzless variety. Ordialis on the left. The fang is a nice one. The bottom of the leaves have this really cool pattern. They're very, very soft. These are very tactile plants. All your kids and grandkids can pet these things. Nothing will come off on them. That's called marmorata. It's an old name for that was a pen wipe plant. It's like you wipe your feather pen off on them. It has nice spotting. The flower, big flowers too. The Kalanchoes, they're, what's that? No. Kalanchoes are subtropical. Apparently where they're from, which is Africa into India and that part of the world, they inhabit the areas between deserts and jungles, so they're sort of temperate climate plants. They don't like to freeze. You got to be a little careful in the cold. They take water pretty well. But they grow pretty well in California. These are the fuzzy ones, tomentosa, the panda plants. There's white ones, there's brown ones. There's new cultivars coming out of these all the time now. I bet if you've grown flapjacks over the years, yeah, big, just a nice mounding red orange plant. When they bloom, the whole thing elongates into a big 4-foot white fuzzy flower stalk. Like an aeonium, that part dies off, but almost always underneath that's triggered more babies underneath, so you just cut that off and you've got more coming up underneath it. That's a very good form of the right called fantastic, so it's got this weird striation going on. Oh, there's the marmorata. Again, I forgot to have another page of that. That's the same one you saw earlier. And the bottom left, you can see there's the images, the flowers on it. That's Kalanchoe fedshankoi in winter bloom. That blooms in the wintertime. That's a lotus land. Who's been to lotus land here? Yeah, there's a destination for you. It's a private estate up in Santa Barbara, Montecito area. It's just about like the Huntington. It's an amazing estate. It's got cycads, it's got succulents, it's got cactus, it's got everything. You have to get reservations to get there. In the old days, you couldn't even get it. Know somebody to get in. Now, if you make reservations, you can get in. And I'd recommend a trip to Lotus Island up to Santa Barbara if you're heading up to that part of the world.
What is the name of this one again?
Kalanchoe fedshankoi. Sounds like a Russian composer. That's an agave Americana behind it. I love blending. We're not talking about the sharp stuff here, but agaves in particular, like they have such an architectural element to them. If you surround them with something soft like this, or even soft ornamental grasses, it's really a nice compare and contrast way to plant. Of course, the big stuff has to go in the back, obviously, like they've done it here. And rocks, that's a big rock in the front. Rocks look great in the context. Succulents look great in the context of rocks and boulders. Well, I would say this one, if you're going to pronounce it Calancho, we should call this one Calancho. This is the supermarket Calancho. This is the ones you buy from the supermarket, full of flowers, and you take it home, and it stays alive, but it never flowers again as good as when you bought it. They flower again, but not like the first. Somehow they forced them in the greenhouses to just look great when you buy them, but they just don't repeat bloom usually as well as when you first got them. But there's new ones, kinds of new, bigger, different flower colors coming out of these now. To me, they're a little bit more houseplanty in nature. Anybody have the mother of millions? Can't get rid of them? Yeah, this actually is an invasive plant in the tropics. Here, it's only invasive in the shadow of where it's at. So because little baby plantlets form on the leaf tips, they fall, they land on the ground or pots next to it, and they root, and you can't get rid of them. But they're not dispersed by winds or winter birds. They're not going to go native in the canyons here, so we're kind of lucky that way. And apparently Hawaii and Florida places, it is a problem plant. They're just a problem for us because you got to pick them out all the time from your other plants. And they flower nice. They're actually really nice plants. I wish they wouldn't do
They
that.
have like a chandelier kind of thing, right?
Yeah, they kind of like, yeah. They're just a million little babies on the leaf at the top left. You see the little babies getting ready to fall.
Yeah.
It's an ingenious way to reproduce yourself. I mean, I got to hand it to them. The one that we wish, the one on the right is called pink butterflies. That one's sterile. That one won't make babies. The one you want to make babies won't make babies. And there's more and more forms of kalanchoes. They're generally soft plants. They're all soft. Some of them flower nicely. They're just a nice little garden accents. The two in the bottom right get big. They're Modoc and Prolifer. They'll grow about this high. They're large. And I found one time that someone had one that's growing next to a leaky hose bib, and it went from a foot to like 6 feet in less than a year. So it's obviously from a sort of a tropical location, so if you water them, they grow. Cotyledons, these are very durable plants from Africa, like a lot of these plants are African in origin. They flower nice, they almost will grow in a vacant lot. They're really bulletproof plants. Most of them are some form of white or burgundy kind of color. There's finger leaf ones, there's fat leaf varieties. They're all forms of orbiculata or undulata. There's really only two varieties and all kinds of sub-varieties. I like the one on the left. They look like little tortellini leaf edges to them. The green one, top left, is a very easy to grow. It's not a spectacular plant, but it's really, really durable. The other two are forms of Lady Smithensis, variegated form on the bottom.
What is the one that's like top left?
That's called, I used to call it just the big green cotyledon. I didn't know, until I researched this book, I didn't know the name of it. It's called Macrantha. I tell people that if you think you know a subject, write a book. And then you know a little bit more. I learned a lot making these books. Like my cactus book, I've always been a little bit weaker on cactus because there's so many. And when I opened my nursery, I probably could identify 5% of cactus on site. Then after 20 years in the nursery business, I could probably identify 15% of cactus on site. Then I wrote a book, and I got about 30% of cactus I could. So there's just a lot, but it's a great way to learn.
Jeff?
Yeah.
Isn't the one on the right called kitten paws?
Yeah, it is. It is called kitten paws, teddy bear paws. There's a lot of common names that applies to it. And it kind of is what that looks like. That's a nice one. That looks like that, remember that calico lucian, the flapjacks? It looks like a white version of that. It's like a convergent evolution. Totally different plant, same shape, but just a real powdery white color. Like the Dudleys, they have like a white Theranos powder that you can actually rub off with your fingerprints in it. Which it's a sunburn protection device. It keeps them from burning.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
Do you sell most of these, or some of them are sort of exotic?
Yeah, my nursery. I couldn't bring the whole nursery here with me. I don't always have everything, but I have a lot of stuff in my shop. So.
Can you order things if you?
I no longer make that promise of a special order because if I remember, if I find it 3 weeks later, if I call you, almost always, if I remember it and I call someone, they say, "Oh, I got that somewhere else." Thanks anyways. So I don't do special orders anymore. But I'll tell you where I think you might find it if I don't have it, or I'll give you the name of it. You can call me in a month, and I'll let you know if I have it. Tylocodons are a little bit more obscure. They make a really nice bonsai kind of a plant too. They're a little bit more of a specialty kind of a plant, but more in the collector realm. How many of you have ice plant of some form that looks glorious for 1 month out of the year? Yeah, the pink carpets. I mean, the Sembrianthemum, there's a few Lapranthus, there's a few varieties, and they're easy to keep alive, and they'll cover a slope. They can be a little bit of fire protection somewhat, although the fires can smolder through them a little bit. But they will bloom beautifully, but for most of them it's like 1 month. So I'm not a big fan of them because for the rest of the year they're kind of just a green nothing.
We have a variety called Land Francis productus. It'll bloom 4 months in the winter, but it will not go low. We have it all around our place down on the hillside here, and we had 22 degrees 4 days in a row, and it almost took the whole place out. So I don't have it all over the place, but in 4 months it will bloom.
Is it kind of more of a big bushy one with big purple flowers?
Oh, it's a grayish with a real fuchsia pink flower, and it's like total blue in the weather.
Yeah, it's worth it.
4 months though.
Well, that's good. That's a lot. There's orange ones. My parents have one. I can't remember the name of it. It's a big, moundy one. And it's bright purple flowers that last a long time. And as a kid, we would stare at them in full bloom. And then we'd look at the sky, and the sky was green because we pixelated our eyeballs staring at those bright purple flowers.
Yeah, I think it's more of a ground cover.
Yeah, most of them are ground covers.
Yeah, but it grows up the banks and down and goes
Yeah.
up.
Well, I mean, if you have a big bank to cover, I mean, most people are not using red apple anymore. Red apple got kind of ran its course. Yeah, it gets kind of ugly. So you can experiment with these.
And so I don't know about anybody else here, but we had 28 degrees a few days. Ours will take that. But we had 22 degrees.
Yeah.
And that was
That's going to kill a lot of stuff. I mean, some of the stuff from South Africa, there's parts of South Africa that get pretty darn cold. So some of the South African stuff, the very South African stuff, it will handle the cold. But again, we just have exceptional, even Santa Anas are different from what these plants have. You know, they're not used to a dry Santa Ana, so even these desert plants sometimes have a tough time with the Santa Ana conditions. So we do have, as good as our climate is, we do have challenges sometimes. There's a bunch of really cute, little teeny weird. I brought the two on the right. I brought some baby toes today, and I brought a split rock today. There's some really nice little container Sembrianthemum messum, South African plants that are soft succulents. That's the tiger jaws, and the usual form of tiger jaws in the top left. They're all soft. If you look at the top left, you see those little brown ones? Those are called lithops. Has anybody here killed a lithop? We've all killed lithops. That's one of the question.
Oh, no, I haven't.
Here's the ring. They're one of the most difficult succulents to keep alive because they were, most stuff I always tell people I water once a week. You water these about once a month or even less sometimes. They're just really sensitive to overwatering. And what happens is they start to get all shrivelly looking and it looks like they need water, but they don't. Actually what's happening is the new one's going to come popping up through the old leaves. And so it's the new one is consuming the old leaves as it grows. But to us, it looks like, oh, that poor thing needs water. So we put water on it out of season and we kill them. So lithops are one of the few succulents that comes with a warning label when someone buys it.
That's the one.
Oh, Lord, I have that.
Okay, you guys recognize that? You take a nice whiff of the flower on those things?
We don't like it.
Yeah, they call it the carrion flower. I mean, dead meat. Flowers stink. They attract flies as pollinators instead of bees. They develop a nice little evolutionary niche to get the right pollinators.
So it's Staphylococcus grandiosa?
What's that?
Is it, how do you say it?
Staphyliads.
Staphylia grandiosa?
There's grandiflora,
Grandi-
there's a few big ones. There's a couple of flowers are almost a foot across the sides. They get really big. And there's a whole bunch of little weird flowering ones. It's actually a very, very big group of plants. And the flowers are great even before they open. They're like these alien pods before they open. They're very, I use these in my underwater gardens because they look like undersea freaky creatures.
Yeah. You can have those?
And then at the end of the book, I follow the flow of the book. I just throw a couple of little catch-all, little unusual things that aren't big enough to have their own chapter, but I just want to show you some of the weird. There's a see top left Calogenia, those purple flowers. It's a beautiful flower. Those plants can grow too fast. They get kind of ugly. You got to chop them up. They're kind of a maintenance issue, I think. I don't really like them anymore. There's nice little bulb ones. That's Albuca spiralis in the middle. Hoyas. Hoyas are sort of houseplant succulents, thick leaf. They got really unusual flowers. Bottom left is peperomia. Bottom right is hibiscus. Bottom middle is a plant called Portulaca molokiniensis. It's from Molokini, a little island out in the valley. I got to keep brain working. I'm starting to lose stuff. I know so much Latin, so the more I say it, the better I'm keeping myself going.
The one in the top center,
Yeah,
I killed, it died in the freeze.
yeah, I probably would. But they also go totally dormant. That looks like a pot of dirt for about 6 months. It's a bulb. So there's a time when the whole thing just dies off. So maybe it froze, but maybe it was alive underground the whole time.
Do you suggest putting in just one plant, letting it spread, or a whole bunch of plants and letting them take over?
Of which?
Of anything.
I like plants, so I want a lot of plants everywhere. It depends on what you want to do. I mean, there's design aesthetics. If you have a succulent garden, you're excused. You can have a crowded garden because we can't help ourselves. We bring stuff home. My yard, I know what good design looks like. Big in the back, small in front, repetition, blank spaces. But when you love plants, you bring plants home, you're going to find a place to put your plants. So as long as you have some repetition, some rocks, you can get away with it. So it all depends on what aesthetic you're looking for. For me, it's just hard to be done. I've done gardens where people wanted this, and some of that, and some of that, and it's done. And then stop buying plants. So if you could do that, more power to you. I can't do that. So this is my new book on spiny succulents, which is cactus euphorbias, and all the spiny guys. It's a lot more pretty than some of you anti-spinites might think. It's really, there's some wonderful plants. Don't rule out. I know I cannot win an argument with a grandmother about grandkids, but don't be worried about spiny stuff. They just plant them in the back where you're not going to touch them. My kids grew up around this stuff, and they're good life lessons. It's good to get stuck by a cactus when you're young. So don't be afraid of those. Those are my other 3 books. The soft succulent book is, there's one left. It's sold out. And I held the box just for this talk because this is my last scheduled soft succulent talk. I'm going to have to reprint it at some point. I have more of aloes, agaves, and the underspell. That's my nursery right there. People ask me about that vine. That's a winter growing vine called a flame vine. Every year it blooms beautifully. It's not a succulent, but it's just been there forever. End of talk. You guys have any You guys have questions? What got me started in this? I got started in this like a lot of people. I got 1 plant, and then I got 2 plants, and then I got 10 plants. But what actually got me started was I went to the Del Mar Fair. I talked about it in my first book in the introduction. I went to the Del Mar Fair in 1984. I saw a display of bonsai succulents. I always thought bonsai were cool, but I didn't do plants at all. But I thought, wow, they were cool. And then I started doing the 1 plant, 2 plant, 10 plant, open my shop and start selling plants. So it's just sort of, you go down a rabbit hole. I think you probably, those of you that like plants will understand how that goes. Does anyone else have any questions about anything? Yeah?
How do you know which ones to put together?
How do you know which ones to combine?
Yeah.
You probably ask somebody like me. I mean, I can tell you. Because you don't want one that's going to get huge or win the whole battle. So it's just experience. Okay, I guess I'm wrapping up here, guys. So thank you very much. My shop's down in Solana Beach. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if the board members will please come up and be seated, and the rest of you, we're going to begin our
Business meeting.
short business meeting.